It's time to step into the Coming Out Lounge, a cool, safe space to be true to your sexual self. With your host, Rick Clemens. Rick has helped hundreds of people come out of the closet, and now each week he's bringing you cool insights for loving and accepting yourself, boosting your self-confidence, and living a guilt-free, purpose-filled life on the other side of the closet doors. Cuddle up with yourself and get ready for heartwarming coming out stories, ideas for living authentically, and tips for being fully self-expressed. Now here's your host, Coming Out Coach Rick.
Hey, Closet Busters. It is time once again for the Coming Out Lounge, and I'm your host, Rick Clemens, the Coming Out Coach. And today I want you to think about, well, diversity and who you are and how you feel included. Because, you know, the moment you discover your sexual orientation and you align your gender identity and you decide that you're just going to take that stand to be who you are, you step into an arena. You step into an arena of diversity and inclusion. You may not have thought about that, but you might want to start thinking about that. Even if you're not coming out of the closet to say, hey, I'm gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, when you claim your truth and you stand up for who you are, you own your diversity and your space on the planet. And that's when the real work begins. And when you also start to battle the real demons that show up telling you that you may not be good enough. Well, buckle up, because you're in for a real treat today, because you are good enough now, and you're about to get an earful and a lesson on being diversely you with my guest. She weaves together politics, current events, storytelling with a huge dose of humor. Jessica is a diversity educator who's in the house, and she's not your average diversity speaker. So let's just get to it. Let's bring her on. Let's talk about all these things she does, whether she's speaking on college campuses or in front of big audiences of people just trying to figure out what the hell's going on in the world, or doing some of her stand-up comedy. Welcome to the show, my newest, bestest, friendest, Jessica Pettitt. Hey, girl. Thanks for being here.
Hi, newest, bestest, girlest, friendest.
Yes, exactly. So to give a little background.
Makes me sound like a dinosaur.
Exactly. But here's a little background for everyone listening. Jessica and I actually did only just meet a few months ago. And we were at the National Speakers Association conference, and she looked at me and she goes, "You look queer." And I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "And you look like you might like queers." And she goes, "Yes, I do." And there we are. We just kind of made it all work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if anything, it was like, you're gayer than a $3 bill, right? And
yeah.
we sat down together.
Yeah, exactly. And then we kept sitting down. I kept stalking her, and then she kept running away from me, and then we became friends. So
that is all very false. I just kept being overwhelmed.
Yes, as we all do when we're at these lovely conferences that we all go to.
True.
So cool, but I'm really happy you're here. I'm excited. I've been waiting for this, and I know we're going to... I don't know what we're going to do today, but we're going to figure it out as we go. So why don't you kind of walk us into why Jessica became this person who's really talking about being good enough and diversity and inclusion and slapping people around and all that sort of stuff when they don't do things that make people feel good about themselves.
Well, let's start at the last piece. Slapping people around is just fun, but it is important to mention that it's metaphorical in a nonviolent way. I worked as a college administrator doing all kinds of diversity work or identity development work for years, and largely was charged by colleges and universities to point out what's wrong. And then when I did, they'd be like, "Ooh, we don't like that," and then they'd fire me. So I have enough privilege to kind of move towns and get a new job. To quote Michelle Schacht, I never found a town in which I was not hired, nor a job in which I was not fired. After the third firing, I decided this might be a pattern, so then I started my own speaking and consulting business, which I have now been doing full-time for about 10 years. And switching from college audiences to more of corporate association audiences, what I realized was whether I'm doing LGBT, trans-specific, social justice broadly, or even just communications and difficult topics, difficult people, that the commonality is a fear of whether or not we're good enough. And so I think this podcast is so perfectly aligned with my mission in that I think when I first started working with people coming out, the fear was whether or not that they would experience rejection, which of course is a reality that a lot of us feel. But that's very similar to the same toolkit or the same kind of fear of feelings that a lot of people feel before they engage in something uncomfortable. Not unsafe, but uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so I chose good enough now to kind of be the common thread in everything that I do, that if we could believe that we are good enough, then we might actually try something uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And now here we are.
That's awesome. And I love this good enough now, because every moment we're as good as we can be. Doesn't mean we can't improve, but there's every moment that passes, even as you and I are talking right now, we're only being as good as we can be in this moment. So just be accepting of that. There's nowhere else you can go, nothing else you can do. Now, the next moment we can improve, we can take those bigger steps, but when we start to embrace and fully own ourselves as we're good enough right now in this moment, it really takes a lot of stress off, don't you think?
I think so. I mean, again, there's a big difference between lack of safety and lack of comfort.
Absolutely.
But you can't grow, you can't challenge yourself, you can't challenge other people unless you're willing to be remotely uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of judgments and assumptions is about feeling safe and prepared. Yep. And you can't necessarily know what that's about until you find out for sure what's going on.
So a lot of this safety, because you brought it up a couple of times, and I know you have done many, many conversations in many different environments around diversity, inclusion, helping people feel safe. One of the things that I know that you do really well is you step into those arenas of talking about the things that people don't want to talk about because they don't feel safe talking about them, correct?
Yes, I am generally not invited to a lot of parties.
Yes.
Because I typically, this is an untouchable, uncomfortable topic. Well, let's just dive right in.
Yeah, let's have the conversation. And why do you think people get so freaked out about that taboo quote stuff?
I think it's the same skill set. I think it's a fear of rejection that you're not going to have the right opinion, mm-hmm. or that someone is going to judge you because of the opinion you do have. And at the base of it, I think most of us have really no idea what our opinion is. Right. Or if we think we know what our opinion is, we don't know why that is our opinion, because it hasn't survived our own questioning method. If we don't engage in conversations, then we don't have to question what we believe. We just think that is. But if we could actually question what we believe, no matter what it is, even if we come back to our beliefs, mm-hmm. we at least then can explain to other people why we believe that. But that takes work and responsibility and focus and self-reflection, and we got things to tweet.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, how do you get someone working on that questioning method? But I think you just answered the question I was going to ask. It does take that deeper reflection, looking at ourselves, questioning, why do I have a belief? Why do I hold that viewpoint? And oftentimes, many of us, most of us, in fact, probably everyone in the world, we kind of have blinders on in different aspects of our lives where we just just go along with what's happening, and we don't question until something really big in our life starts to push us. So I'm going to use the coming out process. I know when I was coming out of the closet, I finally reached this point where living as if it was okay to live this dual life of knowing I was married, had 2 kids, had a wife, but also knowing that I wasn't feeling aligned in my sexual orientation, I finally had to really go question that very deeply and go, why am I struggling in every aspect of life? And lo and behold, yes, it was very much tied to my discomfort in my sexual orientation, but that was also holding me back in other areas of life. So when you talk about going and, using this questioning method, how do you help someone really start to open up to it? What's a simple thing we could, share with the listeners right now about how they start to really dive deeper into questioning themselves?
Sure. And what I think is important is that this is a great space of empathy. So even if someone identifies as heterosexual, mm-hmm. we can still question what Absolutely. It is, where we're at, what are our shortcomings, what are we not seeing? That's what self-reflection is. Yep. So by just noticing how we typically show up, where are we more comfortable, when do we become uncomfortable, all of that is really, really helpful. Mm-hmm. And what I think an easy tip or kind of a good starting place is break it down into teeny tiny bits. So, for example, like, I think I'm a really friendly person. So, evidently, you keep joking, but, like, at the conference, I evidently was not very friendly to you, but I would like to point out, here we are.
Yes.
So, I like to be super friendly, and if I can't give 100% of my attention to someone, I don't like giving anybody 30% of my attention.
Yep.
So, you get 100 or you get, like, none.
Yep.
That's something I believe about myself.
Yep.
So, what I started doing was just paying attention to my attention.
Mm-hmm.
If that's one variable I want to do, what am I paying attention to? What am I not paying attention to? Who's allowed to interrupt me and who's not?
Yep.
And as an entrepreneur, one of the things I realized was a potential client actually had more power than my closest friends or my partner.
Mm.
So if they interrupted me, I would tell them, hold on, I'm working.
Right.
But if a potential client texted me or sent me an email, I'd drop everything and talk to them. And yes, there could be money on the other end of that conversation, but that's not the priorities I want to live by.
Right.
So then I noticed, and then you decide, when you notice something, it fits into three categories. One is you love it. One of it is, this is kind of incongruent or inconsistent with what I typically think about myself. That's interesting. And then the third one is, I don't like that. So when I noticed how I was paying attention to the wrong things, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Now, I also identify as a pacifist, but I use a lot of words that have violent roots, right? Like my phone blows up and I punch buttons on elevators, not to mention I cuss like a sailor. And most swear words are rooted in violence, etc. So I tried I decided I didn't like that. And I decided I would not cuss at all and not use any violent language at all. And what I realized is that I was exerting so much energy to pay attention and filter each word that fell out of my face that now my language is something I'm conscious of, but it has landed in that middle category of this is incongruent, and I need to be prepared for, like, the impact it could have. But I can't just delete it.
Right. And I like
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes complete sense, because I think this is the space where most of us start to wake up, is when we get in that middle space and we go, this is incongruent. It's pretty easy to be black or white. I like this or I don't like this. That's kind of the easy stuff in life. It's when we're in the middle space that this is incongruent with my values, my beliefs, the way I want to show up in the world, the way I want to be perceived by people. When that nagging little pebble in the shoe, so to speak, keeps showing up, to me, those are the moments to pay attention to, because the universe, God, Allah, whatever you believe in, the higher power things in the world, those things are pushing you to pay attention. The source is saying you need to be paying attention to this. And the more we don't pay attention to it, the more it will keep coming back in different ways, inspiring, nudging, slapping us across the face to pay attention to it. And I think these are the moments that truly enable us to grow the most as human beings. So,
absolutely.
I want to clear something up here. Jessica didn't really ignore me. She actually connected me to so many fabulous people at the conference that it made my conference experience really good, because it was my first one. And I was like, not sure I was going to really enjoy the experience, wasn't sure what I was getting into. And I have to honestly say, because of her, I had one of the best experiences possible. So there we go.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. That's really sweet. The other piece that I think is important, and this often gets forgotten when we talk about self-reflection, so I want to make sure to mention it, is that there's also the yes bucket, right? So a lot of times when we're doing self-work, we think we kind of have to, like, format the whole hard drive. Yeah. But, for example, I have received very early in my speaking career, for example, I have received a ton of feedback that my sense of humor is too sarcastic, it is too snarky, it's just inappropriate, and I should remove my sense of humor. And so, in about 7 minutes, I focused really hard on doing this, and I decided that, like, I don't know how to live without my sense of humor. It has gotten me through tons of tragedies and hard times. It's similar to my dad when he was a personal trainer, and he once told me that if I stopped eating donuts, I'd live for 10 years longer. But that's 10 years without donuts.
Exactly.
Like, nope. So the yes pile is really important, and it's the stuff about you that you are now self-aware of, and you have consciously chosen this is going to be who I am. So, like, Rick, when you shared about coming out, in order to, like, live big in your own life, you get to pick and choose what's in your yes pile. And I think you get to choose what's in your incongruent pile, or like, wow, that's a fascinating conflict of beliefs that I have. Interesting.
Right.
And it can just stop there. It doesn't mean you don't have to engage with the public, right?
I also think in the incongruent bucket is the opportunity to see if something belongs in the yes bucket, or if it is, as you just said, if it's okay to just let it be. You know, right now I'm in a space where I'm not having any communication with my parents over my quote-unquote gay lifestyle. And I'm okay right now to let that be. It's not congruent with how I am in my values and beliefs to say, nope, I can't be with you in a relationship. That's not how I typically show up. But I'm also allowing it to be okay for the time being, because I'm choosing that. I think this is where we start to step into some of the like mindfulness talk and things such as that. But allowing yourself to be in the incongruencies can actually help you move to either yes or a solid, this is okay to just be here, or you can move to the other side of, nope, that doesn't work and I'm going to change it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're in the driver's seat, right? And so, but, you know, I spend a lot of money going to, like, self-help conferences, so let me save people some money here for a second. But you can stop and think and look at your life. And is your life happening to you, or are you happening to your life?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just saved you, like, $10,000.
There you go. Thank you.
So, you're welcome. It's one of those things, right, is that I'm privileged enough to go to these things, and then I'm like, well, damn, that was simple.
Yeah.
But there's so many times where life is happening to me, and I just feel out of whack, right? Like, I got 48 hours to be home. I have 300 loads of laundry to do. I got to go to the grocery store. I got to clean out my email. I would like to see my partner, maybe go for a dog walk. Oh, it also would be really good to, like, eat a nutritious meal since I travel so often.
Right.
Maybe even go to the gym. Like, that is life happening to me, because what ends up happening is it's too much, and so I end up Netflix binging on the couch before my next flight.
Mm-hmm.
Living my own life is like, okay, here's the set period of time I have. Here's the list of millions of things I need to do that is too much for this period of time. Great. What choices am I going to make? Well, my partner and my dog are the two most important things that I cannot do on the road.
Yep.
So what can I do? So I have a conversation with my partner, I have a conversation with my dog, and I find out what is it they want to do. Okay, great. That is now the priority. And then, if need be, I throw in some clean underwear in my suitcase and I go out on the next trip.
I think they need to start a rent-a-dog program in cities where you can just rent a dog and go walk it.
That would be amazing, and they do actually have puppy libraries in some cities.
Oh, that's right, they do.
Let's be honest, none of these rented dogs are going to be my dog.
No, exactly. So let's kind of turn to like a little more of the professional side, because I know you do a lot of work.
What, talking about my dog isn't professional?
Well, okay, fine. Let's talk more about your dog. But let's talk about this diversity thing, because I think right now, and this, I'm going to be really honest on this. Well, I'm always honest on these podcasts, but this is going to air literally just right around the time that we will be casting those votes for our president.
Right.
So you and I, and anybody who's actually got their ears open, know that diversity and inclusion is actually a huge hot button in this election. And you have to be kind of deaf if you're not hearing this. So I know when you look at this, it's not just LGBTQ, because we look at everything. You and I both kind of see this in the same way. Diversity crosses so many different lives, so many different people, so many different cultures. If you could say what the problem is from your perspective doing the work you do, what's going on right now? Is it just fear? Is it just uneducation, not the right education? Is it not talking? What's going on that suddenly this has become a huge hot button once again? Well, I don't think it's once again. It's been a hot button no matter what. But I'm just curious, your perspective.
Yeah, sure. So my answer is probably going to be not what people are expecting, because that's typically how I roll. But what I think, there's two things that I think are really important, or maybe three. Let's go with three. First off, none of this is new.
Yep.
So regardless of who them, using air quotes, are,
yep,
we are, as a culture, as individuals, I'm not blaming the media or politics for this, as individuals, as a party of one, we are completely distracted from anything that actually matters at any given 30-second, maybe 30-minute interval, depending on how big it is. Mm-hmm. If we are going to be distracted, then everything looks new. So nothing in this presidential election is original. It has all happened before. This is not new. But because it feels new, it fuels fear. Now we move to door number 2. Door number 2, fear. Politics has become a fear-based journey, and that is also not new. Within my own lifetime, this started with Reagan, with both Bushes, Clinton. Bill Clinton's entire campaign is based on fear, and a lot of his political decisions was based on fear. Following George W. Bush, there was a lot of fear. Obama has a lot of fear. Fear is important. Fear is, without taking responsibility, we can throw money at something. So if fear is really what's going to be driving our politics, then door number 3 is we need to be terrified. And so if we can be terrified, we then go back to door number 1, which is where we're easily distracted. So with that stated, which I'm incredibly confident in saying that that is what the problem is, but with that stated, what is imperative to understand is the same fear that people feel if Hillary Clinton is elected or if Donald Trump is elected is the same fear we felt if Obama was elected a second time or if George W. Bush was elected at the same time. We just don't remember it.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how we forget things so easily as humans? I mean,
we're like sheeple. I can't remember my Skype login name. How am I supposed to remember political infractions that have happened over the last 60 years?
Right.
My favorite social justice quote is that it is an exquisitely designed system produces the result it gets.
Yeah.
So the last thing I would say, because this is going right out at the election, is I'm not some kind of psychic truth teller, but it is imperative that we remember that the supporters of the quote-unquote other side still will exist November 9th.
Exactly.
And if we're actually going to do something different, what we need to do is create a sense of civility that will last past November 8th.
Yes.
These people are not going to, go down the drain or disappear off the planet.
All right.
They're going to be walking amongst us, and we're going to have to figure out how to make that a welcoming place for everyone. That's really key.
It is very key because I think this is at the core of the coming out journey, no matter how you want to look at this, whether you're coming out as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, poly, blah, 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 all the different, sexual orientation, gender identity coming out stories, or you're coming out as recently as someone who's going through a divorce like Brangelina. It's like these things are happening, and when everything dies down, we're still all here. We're still gay, we're still lesbian, we're still poly. Brad and Angelina are still getting divorced. Friends is off the air. Whatever it is, all this stuff still exists. And I think as humans, we forget that we can have these inciting incidents. We can have an attack in New York City. We can have ISIS, penetrate another country and take, claims for whatever's happening wherever on the globe. Regardless of what it is, we all still exist. Except those who lose their lives. But even in that point, those who lose their lives, that still exists. So we got to quit saying, here's when this all changes and now this is done, because it isn't done. This is a continuum of life. At least that's my perspective. And I think that's kind of what you're saying too. Yes,
absolutely. I think that the waiting for something means that I'm not responsible for something.
Right. Yep.
And that hasn't worked, And I think if I could pick on my fellow pinko commie liberal friends, coexistence, that blue bumper sticker that says coexist, that shouldn't be a goal. That's already happening.
Right, it is.
We are already doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can shift our thinking to believe that we're already coexisting, I honestly believe it would be a peaceful, more kind, gentle world.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't even admit we're coexisting with people.
Right.
We just want to, Command X over them or Control Alt Delete and start over.
But that's what it's all about. I love the Control Alt Delete because it's like if we all had a Control Alt Delete button on our lives, I think many of us would be using those buttons every day to go, okay, let's redo this. It'd be Groundhog Day for every one of us every day of our lives because we go, oh, that didn't work. But yet, in a way, when we wake up each morning, we actually get the chance to be Groundhog Day or do a Control Alt Delete if we didn't like what we did the day before. We stand at choice.
You know why? Dun, 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 because we're good enough. If we can be good enough, then we can at least try.
Ooh,
but instead of waiting to get perfect.
That's a really good tweetable right there. If we are good enough, then we can at least try.
It's almost like I did this for a living.
Well, I wonder. Something tells me you do. So, I know that you have been representing lots of different taboo subjects. I'm just curious, in the last few minutes that we have, what has been one of the most challenging subjects that you've come up against that people have the most resistance to? Is it the gay lesbian? Is it the transgender? Is it the women's rights? Is it the cultural diversity? What's really difficult at times to really come up against?
Yeah, see, I think that those, I call those Jeopardy columns.
Yep.
So I think the Jeopardy column topics, we like to think those are the scary ones. Because there's, you've mentioned poly, for example. People don't necessarily know what polyamorous means. They don't have the vocabulary. Same thing with, asexual or mono or bi, multiracial. We're coming up with words all the time that just add squares to the Jeopardy columns.
Yep.
But I think the scariest thing, the most difficult topic, is that you got to go play the game. It's not the content. It's the actually showing up to press the button, if we keep this game show metaphor going.
Yep.
That it's actually taking responsibility for your own implicit or explicit bias. That bias is positive and negative. We tend to only focus on the negative, but positive bias has just as much limitations as negative bias does, and we have to take responsibility for it.
Mm-hmm.
So by taking responsibility, it's sorting it out into those three buckets. Yes, weird, or no, but we have to do this, and we are completely 100% responsible for how we show up in our individual relationships. That is the most terrifying thing I deal with.
Mm-hmm.
The other stuff is vocabulary.
Well, I agree. The vocabulary is what screws so many people up. And then not only the vocabulary, but what people's perception is of that vocabulary. I mean, I know for me, when I first started speaking on PFLAG panels and I was sitting right there besides transgender men and women, man, those talks were difficult because it was very hard for people to wrap their head around, okay, they couldn't get past the genital thing. They never can. That's the,
right.
It's like if nobody gave a damn what was between your legs, God, things would be so much easier.
You know what's really a fascinating piece about that? So my partner and I often do trans-related trainings together as a trans man, as a partner.
Yeah.
We often do this, and he said once in a training, and this was just so brilliant, is that it's socially unacceptable for us to really know anything about each other's genitals, right? Mm-hmm. Unless, that is super consensual and super intimate.
Yep.
But the reality is that even in this training, you have a fairly good guess. Yep. This is what he said. Fairly good guess what my wife's genitals look like, but you don't know what mine look like, and that's upsetting.
Wow.
And that is such a true piece. It has nothing to do with anything, and it's certainly none of your business. But because you can't guess, then all bets are off until you can guess. And that's why it's almost always the first question. And it's completely inappropriate. It's completely inaccessible. And depending on kind of what you're looking for, it's often has a very, very high failure rate. But cisgender or non-trans people, we like to think that it's all about genitals, when in reality, cisgender people, whether gay or lesbian or bisexual or fluid or heterosexual, the first thing shouldn't be a picture of our genitals. Now, I do know some people overshare, specifically over text and pictures and stuff. I don't need any more dick pics in my entire life. But what I think is important is that if we have reduced individuals down to their value of their genitalia, then we're going to need to know what other people's genitalia is. And that is an awkward first question at an interview.
Yes. It's an awkward question no matter what it is. I mean, to me, it's an invasion of your personal rights.
Absolutely. So I really love doing this. So I had a hysterectomy in January. So I no longer have a uterus or ovaries. I do not naturally produce estrogen. I do not identify as a trans person, but it certainly does fit people's definition of something that they need to know about. Why does the status of my uterus have any impact whatsoever on my job?
Exactly.
What's funny is I'll say that, and then people will say, like, well, we don't need to talk about specifics. And I was like, you were just asking how do people have sex. That's pretty specific.
That is very specific. You know, it's almost like it's this, we want to understand your genitals, but we don't want to learn about what you do with them. Well, then why are you even concerned? What does it matter?
Unless I don't know what you're doing with them, then I do need to know what you're doing with them.
Yes, but even then, when people want to do that, then once they get started down that pathway, they're like, okay, now I don't want to hear this. Then don't ask. It's like you have this weird need to know, yet as soon as we give you permission to know, if we grant that permission, you flip out.
And then over-sexualize us and then determine that we as queer people are only talking about sex.
Exactly, yes.
Right.
As if that's all we do in the LGBTQP, whatever, all the letters of the alphabet we have in our lovely world, that's all it's about is sex, which is...
Right. I've been married for 10 years, so everybody knows that we're not having sex.
Yes. Exactly. So as we wrap up here, one of the questions I always ask, and first of all, I'm going to say I love having you on here. I could go for another 30, 40 minutes, but we wrap these at right around the 30-minute mark. But the question I always ask is if you could give someone some advice as they start this journey of being themselves, not necessarily coming out, could be, but as they venture into saying, I want to be confident, I want to be unique, and I want to be me. What would be the advice you'd love to leave the listeners with?
I would say that the hardest, easiest thing that you're going to challenge yourself to do for the rest of your entire life, because as soon as you think you get it, then you're going to have to start over. It's like a spin cycle. The hardest, easiest thing you're going to do for the rest of your life is figure out who you are. So if you're struggling to do it, that's called living. If you think you already figured it out, you got to hit restart so you can start struggling again. If you can get comfortable with that spin cycle, then you are living the highest, most self-reflective life possible.
And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being
here.
Dun, dun, dun.
Absolutely. Thank you for all your work and all your listeners. Thank you for being you, doing the best you can with what you got. Some of the time is better than nothing never.
And if people want to find you, we're going to have all the information up on the show page. You can find her at goodenoughnow.com, Jessica Pettitt. You can see her videos. You'll find her Facebook, her Twitter, her LinkedIn, her YouTube channel. Everything will be available right here on the show page. And definitely want you to go check her out. She's awesome. She's funny. And she's just a really genuine human being. So thanks for being here, Jessica.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Hey, Closet Dwellers and Coming Out Lounge listeners. I wanted to invite you to check something out. You know, for all the years that I've been a coming out coach, one thing I've learned is sometimes people come to do the work with me and they only need a little bit of help to get over something very particular and very important to them. It could be reconciling their religion and sexuality. Maybe it's learning how to have the difficult conversations where they say, I'm gay. Possibly it could be, oh my God, I'm out of the closet, but now how do I do this same-sex dating and mating sort of thing? Well, what I can tell you is throughout the years, there are common things that show up over and over and over again. And what I've heard most from my clients and listeners of the podcast is, I want a way to work with you just on these particular subjects. Yay! I'm so excited because I've taken the action and I've made this possible. So how do you find out about these particular programs? You go to thecomingoutcoach.com, or if you're on the show page right now listening to the podcast or have just listened to the podcast, over to the right-hand side of the podcast description, everything is an icon that says one-on-one coaching sessions. Click on that button. You'll be taken to a page that describes each of the different 9 sessions I'm offering. There are one-on-one sessions that we can do via phone, Skype, or even FaceTime. They're very action-oriented. We go right to the topic that you want to talk about. And each of these sessions also includes a copy of my book, Frankly, My Dear, I'm Gay. So what more could you ask for? You get me for 90 minutes devoted to you, plus my book. So go check it out. See if there's something that could help you as you step out, step up, and step in to living your powerful truth. Take care. I'm Rick Clemens, the Coming Out Coach. I look forward to working with you.
You've just experienced the Coming Out Lounge. Go online to www.comingoutlounge.com to learn more and tune in again next week for more stories and tips for being true to yourself.